I'm Maya, nice to meet you. And I've been a marketer for more than a decade now, and I had the opportunity to work for companies like Microsoft and Google, but I also worked for small, early-stage startups. And I can tell you that working for an early-stage startup is nothing like working for a Fortune 500. And my second day as the VP of marketing for a fintech startup, I walk into the kitchen, and a little side note, anything that's important in a startup is going to happen in the kitchen. So I walk into the kitchen, I see the CFO, and he's looking at me all smiling and asks me for the yearly budget on my second day. So I thought, this is a joke, I'm the new girl. But apparently he was dead serious because we had a board meeting the following week, and he needed the budget. So within 24 hours, I put together a marketing budget for a company I know almost nothing about. So that was my experience with the startup world. But to give you a little bit of context, I was the VP of marketing for Colo. I was one of the first marketing hires. And when I joined the company, there was nothing done around marketing. So basically, I had to build everything from the ground up. And this is pretty much what I want to talk to you about today, about the 18 months that I spent building product marketing and how it helped to grow and scale the company. And just to give you the right context, Colo is a digital wallet app. So kind of like Google Pay or Venmo, it's an app that you use to make purchases through your phone. And we had a marketplace. So we own the SMBs who were actually paying in order to use that app to accept payments, but we were also recruiting the end consumers who were making purchases with the app. And, and once I kind of had my welcoming into the startup world, I had to start thinking about product marketing and who is my customer. And if you've been in product marketing for more than a minute, you know that you need to know your customer in order to be able to do anything around marketing. And for us, it was a bit of a challenge. On the SMB side, we knew exactly who our customers were. On the consumer side, it was a bit of a challenge. And I remember talking to the CEO, I spoke to the management team, I interviewed our product team, our sales team, I even spoke to our engineers, but they all had different opinions as to who our customers were, but no one had the data to actually validate it. And if I would have taken everything they told me and put it together, I would basically end up with an audience who is every person on earth, which if you've been in marketing, you know that's not an option. So I decided to take action. And I needed to do something really quick and dirty, so I just used a Google form, put together a survey, and sent it out to 5,000 of our customers. And within a week, I had about 100 submissions, and suddenly it was becoming a little bit more clear who our customers were. So we knew that our customers were divided evenly between men and women. We realized the main age bracket was actually 30 to 35, although most people in the company thought we were talking to a much younger audience, people who were more tech savvy and will be more inclined to use a digital app. But we were wrong, as you can see. But this information wasn't enough. I also needed to know the why. Why were they using the app? Why us, not our competitors? And in order to do that, you actually need to talk to your customers in person. Now, I was born in the 80s. I didn't really use dating apps, didn't have Tinder. The only blind date I ever went on was so bad that it was also the last. So the idea of picking up the phone and calling 30 strangers and trying to convince them to come meet me for coffee was basically terrifying. But it had to be done. So I started by putting together a list of some of our best customers, some churn customers, and also a few prospects, just to keep it even. And I probably stared at that list for about a week before I got the courage to actually pick up the phone and have the first conversation. You see, I thought that our customers are going to be mad at me. I thought they're not going to be interested in talking to me. As it turned out, they were very excited to tell me every single thing that was wrong with our app. Conversations that we planned for 30 minutes turned into an hour, and then they asked for my email to send me more comments later. And at that point, I didn't have a budget. I didn't have a fancy agency to help me, no team. So I recorded every conversation. I transcribed everything, put it into a Google Sheet, and basically did manual cluster analysis to try and figure out, do we have a trend here? Can I figure out why these people were using our app? And we did. So what we discovered was really interesting. We realized that customers were downloading the app for one reason, but they were justifying it for a completely different one. You see, Kolu had a social agenda. We weren't just a payment app. We were a payment app for buying locally from small businesses. And that made people feel really good about themselves. So they would download the app because it was easy and it was convenient. They could leave the house without taking the wallet. But when they were asked about it, they told everyone the beautiful story about how they're supporting small businesses, how they're buying locally, and doing something good for their community. And once we realized we actually have to juggle between two different types of messaging, we completely revamped all of our marketing materials so that we can make the most out of it. And within 6 months, we were able to decrease our cost of acquisition by 15%. We tripled our retention, going from 5% to 15%, something that was unheard of in the fintech industry. And overall, we doubled our lifetime value. And for a small startup, let me tell you, that's a lot of dollars. Another thing that we learned from this experience is that we needed to adopt a data-driven mindset for the company. So when this whole process was done, I put it together in a deck and shared it with the entire company, because we wanted to make sure that every decision we were making from that day forward was based on actual data. And I remember after that conversation, one of the engineers came up to me. He was super excited. He loved the thought of numbers, and he wanted to put together this dashboard that will have all of our numbers real time. And we ended up creating that dashboard, and we splashed it on this huge screen that was positioned in the only place in the company that everyone would see it, the kitchen. Now, after that wonderful experience with our consumers, we decided it's time to look at the other side of our marketplace. We had to do a similar process with our business customers. It was important that we also interviewed them and learned a little bit about their needs. And at the time, I was the expert on talking to customers. So I was tasked with putting together a road trip, 3 cities in 4 days. And I was an Army brat. I also served in the Israeli Air Force. So that agenda was packed. It was planned to the minute, including bathroom breaks. But it was really useful. We started by asking our businesses really simple questions. You see, it's important when you talk to your customers not to start by giving them your options. You want to give them the opportunity to tell you what they really think. So we started with open-ended questions, and we ended up with gold, because what we came up with was actually an unknown, something that we would have never thought about asking. You see, small businesses, they have a huge gap between the time they buy their merchandise and the time they actually get money in the bank after making a deal. And when they worked with MasterCard or Visa, they were getting their money within 24 hours. When they worked with us, we were only able to settle every other week. So we actually made that gap bigger. Now, they didn't care about the new analytics. They didn't care about how fast the app was. All they cared about is that we're going to make that gap smaller. And once we realized this answer kept repeating itself and all customers told us the same thing, we went back to the management team and completely revised our roadmap for the next couple of months. And because we were able to do this, it became a lot easier to onboard our SMBs, and we were actually able to do it a lot faster. When we started, we worked with everyone. I mean, we were a startup. If you're willing to pay, we're willing to sell. We basically sprayed and prayed. But at some point, we realized that our sales team can't scale anymore, and we need to understand where we should focus. And that was the time for us to start thinking about segmentation. Who are our best customers? Who are the money makers? Because we couldn't continue spending the same amount of time and effort from the sales team on every customer. So again, we went back to the data, and we came up with 2 criteria in order to rank our customer base. The first was very simple: revenue, how much money they were actually driving. And the second was around how many new customers they were onboarding to the app. Because you see, we had a marketplace. We relied a lot on network effects. So we really needed new customers to come into the system. If a business was actually onboarding them, he was doing our job for us. So those 2 criteria were the most important ones. Went back to the data, ranked our customers from 1 to 5 on every element. And then I focused on the top 30%. And my job was to try and understand what's different, what makes them unique. Can I categorize them in a way so that our sales team can continue and find more businesses just like that? And what we realized is that our moneymakers, our best businesses, were businesses who were selling everyday commodities. So coffee places, restaurants, even pet shops, anything that had a habit attached to it, something you do daily or weekly. And they were the ones driving the most revenue, regardless of their size. And once we realized that, our sales team was completely dedicated to only recruiting those type of businesses. But we didn't want to exclude anyone. So we also created a self-serve version, basically a website where businesses who really wanted to work with us but didn't tick all the boxes could actually go through the application process without any support from sales. And the initial result was that our net new customer numbers dropped. But within a few months, our revenue actually grew. So I guess we did find the right customers. But with an early stage startup, that's not always enough. Unfortunately, we had to figure out a faster way to grow. Recruiting those small businesses took a lot of time and a lot of money. Now, if you have the amount of money that Uber or Airbnb raised, it's really easy. But when we are a small startup and you don't have a lot of funding, you need to get creative. So we put our minds together as a management team, and we came up with 2 alternatives, 2 different ways to go to market who might actually help us scale. The first was to work with local partners, so potentially hire individuals or teams that already had connections in a specific city. So when we get there, it's actually easier to grow. And we would work with them based on a rev share model. The second idea was about working directly with municipalities. You see, if you work with city officials, you actually get access to every SMB in the city and every citizen. So it was kind of a no-brainer. But we still had to do a lot of research. And I was tasked with learning about municipalities. Now, every time I heard the word municipality, I had a picture in my head. I couldn't stop imagining the DMV scene from Zootopia, the one with the sloth. Oh my God, I wanted to pull my hair out. But after I did a little bit of research, I learned that not all municipalities were outdated. A lot of them actually went through a digital transformation. And there was this entire category called Smart City that was booming, and it was all about selling services to municipalities. So after doing a ton of reading, I realized reading is not enough. I need to talk to someone who's an insider, who can give me more insights. I reached out to my network, and I was able to find a complete stranger who was a smart city consultant. That meant that he was working with municipalities in order to help them find technological partners just like us. I took him out for coffee. It wasn't as embarrassing. And he told me everything we needed to know. How long were the sales cycles? What did the buying committee look like? What should we expect in terms of budget? Or my favorite, that municipalities really wanted everything to be personalized and tailored to their needs. And I took all that information, put it into a proposal, and within 2 weeks, we got our board to approve it. And this was our new go-to-market. But now it was time to actually create all of the marketing assets that are going to accompany that work. And we also needed to figure out which municipalities do we want to talk to. So we started by ranking them. Surprisingly enough, there's a list of the top smart city-enabled municipalities, so that was an easy one. But then we realized municipalities had different challenges, but they all worked with our solution. And what I mean by that is, for some cities, their biggest pain was collecting taxes. And we could help, we had a payment app. For other municipalities, they actually wanted to drive more foot traffic to the suburbs because they wanted a better distribution of wealth. You can do that with a payment app. So what pain do we stick to? Well, apparently all of them, because they wanted a very personalized solution. So we had to create every marketing material, every sales enablement, every pitch deck to that specific municipality. Let me tell you, that was a lot of work. But we also had to be really, really quick. You see, one day our CEO got a phone call from one of our investors. That investor was at a conference, kind of like this one, and he met the mayor of Belfast. And he already sold her on the idea, and he promised to send her all of our marketing materials that day. Marketing materials that did not exist. So I worked very late that day, and within 48 hours, our CEO was on a plane to Belfast. 6 months later, we signed our first six-figures deal based on that deck. And if you go to Colu's website today, you will see that they have completely changed their models and they're working exclusively with municipalities based on that successful experience. So I think working for startups is very different than working for Fortune 500 companies. But there are a lot of takeaways you can take from that story, hopefully, and apply it to different size companies. And if I had to mention just 3, I would say start with adopting a very scrappy mindset. This is something I've been trying to do throughout my career, no matter if I had a big budget or if I didn't have a big budget. When you try to think outside the borders of money or what you can and can't do, you become really creative. And I think more often than not, you will actually be more successful. The second takeaway is this. Do not assume, validate. Let me repeat this one more time. Do not assume, validate. It sounds like a no-brainer. I mean, of course, everyone does that, right? No. Most of the companies I worked for, most of the startups I mentored, they kind of rely on their intuition or their past experience because, how are we going to get the data? Well, if I was able to do it, anyone can do it. So please, please, please try to validate your assumptions. And last but not least, if there's only one takeaway you take from this today, please, please talk to your customers. It is so much easier to send out a survey or read a report by Gartner. But there's a huge difference, and the insights that you're going to gain by actually talking to your customers can make a difference in your company. It can completely change the trajectory, and it can really help you grow and scale. I know it did for us. So if you're in marketing, product marketing, do yourself a favor and always talk to your customers. Thank you. Question? Yeah. Happy to answer anything. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I do work at a startup. One issue that we are facing is we do send out service to our current users and customers, but the result is actually a lot different than what we expected. Will you think is like the surveys biased, or like will you send out more surveys to get the result you are expecting, or you just think like the original target audience like you were targeted is actually wrong?
Okay, there are a lot of different options here. So one, it really depends on the size of the audience. You need to speak to enough people to actually see a trend. So I would say first, make sure that it's statistically valid. It's a decent number. Number two, it has a lot to do with the questions. Some questions are inherently biased. So you need to make sure that you're asking the right questions. And if you want to reach out offline, I'll be happy to share with you some of the experiences that I had with that. I also think sometimes it's good that you get something that is exactly the opposite of what you imagined, because maybe that will shift your perspective and help you do your work much better. Or it means you need to focus on a completely different audience, but it will really depend on the actual information. So we can chat about that.
Get you guys out.
I'm sorry if I came in late and you answered this already, but how did you transition from what you were doing before to now what you're doing, which is a strategic advisory kind of a role?
That's a very interesting question. So I moved here from Israel about a year ago. And early on, because I moved to a new country and I had a lot to do, it was much easier for me to take a consulting role because I needed to be flexible. So that's the real answer. But I'm definitely working on the next step, kind of going back to the startup world. Sure.
Have you, I work for, big company enterprise customers. Have you ever experienced where the account executive pushed back on you speaking with their customer? And if so, how did you address that?
Honestly, when I joined Kolu, no one was really talking to customers on a regular basis. I mean, obviously the salespeople had to talk to them, but no one was doing the work of asking the hard questions. So they didn't really push back. They definitely pushed back on some of the sales enablement, and initially we butted heads, and then we just kind of built a relationship of trust, but it took time. So the best advice I can give is just make sure that you try to see everything from their perspective. Start by sharing and not asking, and then hopefully they will reciprocate.
Thank you for the great presentation. So my question is about, so as the first marketing role in the startup, how do you emphasize that marketing is so important that your research on the user's segmentation should align with the PM's role and the co-founder's role?
That is a great question and something I actually had to deal with. So I got the data. That's the short answer. It wasn't my opinion. It wasn't what I was thinking. I just went out and got the data. And when you see that, when I worked with my CEO and he actually saw the data, he was like, okay, I guess we were wrong, because I didn't make that up. So that was the best way for me. But you also have to build trust. And in a similar way, when I started this interview process, I did talk to the product team and I did let them know that I'm doing this. They were kind of happy because they didn't have the time to do that themselves. And when I did the road trip, the VP of product actually came with me. So we did it together. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing. Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm in a very similar situation right now. New to the startup world, so I come from the big company, so I'm used to having the resources, and now I'm trying to learn how to be scrappy. And I'm in a very similar situation of trying to figure out who's that target user for us. The question is, how did you manage to reach the prospects? So, we have a way of reaching out to our users, and that's setting up phone calls or coffee chats or surveys, but how do you identify the potential user and then like outreach to them in a scrappy way?
LinkedIn, my network. I literally reached out to everyone I ever worked with. We were based in Israel, but we had operations in the UK. So I needed to talk to people in Liverpool and in London. And I remembered at Microsoft, I work with a team in London. So I just reached out. Do you know anyone who would like to talk to me for 5 minutes? And yeah, basically that. And then I told everyone in the company to do the same. So we just basically figured out how to reach people. Yeah. I have a tiny favor to ask. If anyone took a picture by any chance, and you wouldn't mind sending it to me, that will be lovely. And if anyone wants to continue the conversation, this is my email. Feel free. I'm more than happy to share advice anytime. Thank you.